Hello, it's Tracy Dix again from Wyrd Learning, and today I am on my penultimate card, day 53, Supposition Action. I'm really excited about this because we're really close to the end, and I have new ideas for things to discuss on social media. So, presupposition action. A presupposition is a subtle assumption. When you start using these subtle assumptions, you'll notice it almost flies under the radar of your prospect's conscious attention. Formula: when you blank, then blank. Examples in action. When you click the link below, you'll be granted access. When you submit your email, you'll receive blank. When you join us inside the program, you'll get blank. Okay, so just really quickly, obviously in essay writing you don't use the first person I's, you's and we's. So today's discussion will be kind of similar to the previous one, day 52, which was about the ripple effect, because it's pretty much about cause and effect. So when you do this, then something happens, but you wouldn't write it in that way because of not writing in the first person. So as I mentioned in the last video, so when demand goes up, then what happens to supply and so on. But let's think more specifically about language patterns that you might use around research studies, because that's a little bit more relevant to essay writing. One thing I would say actually is you might come across this sort of cause and effect style of writing in some research articles, particularly if they were written a while ago, so perhaps a couple of decades ago, because the style was more prosaic very often. So in the sense that, authors would be a little bit more descriptive. So first of all, they gathered their sample population together, and then they trialed this on them, and then, so it's a very kind of process driven kind of style of writing. Whereas these days, it tends to be more evaluative. And so the assumption is that in terms of the planning and the thinking that goes behind the essay writing, you would already have considered how a study is carried out, how it was designed, what results were obtained from it, and then again, think about the data, disaggregate it if needs be. So think about, well, are we interested in respondents of different ages, of different age groups, and what might those results or particular trends in those results tell us about the research question? And you would evaluate all that evidence. So what does this tell us about this particular research topic? How might the findings be applied in future, whether it's to improve processes, to reduce cost, to improve efficiencies, improve outcomes, all sorts of different things you can think about. It's also certainly helpful when thinking about academic research to try and push a line of inquiry a little bit further than you would normally. So when I said, in my previous video about demand and supply, add in a third variable about price. And, so for example, I talked about restaurateurs. So if you're running a restaurant and you're suddenly told you have to close, then think beyond that. So not just the restaurants and the diners, but what about supply chains? So people who supply the raw ingredients to restaurants, and then on the other side of the scale, because it's consumers who drive that demand for eating out, what are the alternatives? So it could be, well, they'll eat in instead, and most of what we buy, the food we buy, comes from supermarkets. Supermarkets have the highest percentage market share in terms of shopping for food. So what opportunities does that present? Does that then mean that supermarkets moved towards a kind of ready meal concept? And some supermarkets have like a Saturday night takeout kit where they have almost something that emulates like the meal deals from Chinese takeaways or Indian takeaways, and they kind of sell that in a bundle. So perhaps we would have seen during that period that supermarkets would focus more on that and kind of increase the supply of those sorts of products in order to meet the demand for diners who are now unable to go out to a restaurant. So I hope that's a kind of simple way of highlighting how you can push lines of inquiry and kind of develop your thinking a lot further. And that makes for a more sophisticated argument as well, because it shows your marker that you've thought about the kind of nuances and the complexities of, you know, your topic and how it relates to day-to-day life and how it relates to the real world, which is really why we're kind of interested in research in the first place, because it's about furthering our knowledge in ways that can apply to humankind. Okay, so again, I hope this has been interesting and useful. And like I say, do subscribe, because beyond the 54-day challenge, we've got lots of other ideas for things that we can discuss that will be helpful to your university work. So goodbye for now, and do join me again tomorrow for the last day of my conversion card challenge.